Hello everybody and welcome to another countdown of the weekly top 10 best-selling light novels in Japan. This covering the week of February 5th to the 11th of 2018. So this week, kind of interesting developments on the list. I'm kind of wondering if the Ryuou's work is never done had either A really fabulous episode, or B, people are getting more into it because that series owns the list this week, or at least it does in terms of number of spots that it occupies. However, it kind of seems to me like I don't know if there was a lot of big releases this week, because there was one in particular big release that, like, when we get there, we'll talk about it. But man, when you see the disparity between the sales numbers of every other title on this list and then how much was sold of the number one book this week, I think you'll get the idea that maybe the reason we are seeing the Ryuo's work is never done creep up is because a lot of people just decided to get out of the way of this behemoth release. So let's get into the list, starting at number 10 with 3,517 copies sold. Volume number 3 of Ryuo no Oshigoto, the Ryuo's work is never done. So of course this one has been on the list, one volume or another has been on the list for the last couple of weeks, pretty much since the anime started. This of course volume number 3. We are getting this in English from Bookwalker. It's exclusively available through Bookwalker. You can't get it anywhere else, and it is only available in ebook format. So far they've released the first 2 volumes of the series. And the anime is, of course, airing right now, as I said, and you can watch it on Crunchyroll. It's streaming in with English subs on Crunchyroll. Now, we might as well just shoot ahead and get through this. So at number 9, with 3,541 copies sold, volume number 2 of Ryuo no Oshigoto. Okay, the Ryuo's work is never done. That's got number 9. At number 8, with 3,837 copies sold, volume number 1 of Ryuo no Oshigoto. Are we seeing a pattern? I'm seeing a pattern. Finally, at number 7, with 4,185 copies sold, volume number 7 of Ryuo no Oshigoto, the Ryuo's work is never done. Of course, volume 7 being the most recent volume, which has been the volume that has remained steadily on the list since its release a couple weeks ago. We have seen like the other volumes 1, 2, and 3 kind of touch into the list at different points since the anime started airing, but volume 7's been pretty consistently on the list since its release. That's it for the Ryuo's work is never done. It takes spots 10 to 7. So, but at least, now we can get into some other stuff. At number 6, with 4,287 copies sold, volume number 9 of Isekai Maou to Shoukan Shoujo no Dorei Majutsu, or as it's known in its English release, How Not to Summon a Demon Lord. This is volume number 9, was on the list last week. Of course, the isekai story of a boy who is summoned by an elf and a cat girl, basically. I think she's called like a panthera or something. But anyway, she's a cat girl. Let's just call her what she is. He's summoned to another world by these 2 girls. They argue over who exactly summoned him. And he's summoned in the persona of the avatar he plays in a video game, which is a demon lord, and the girls try to enslave him so that they can control him. The magic backfires, and they become his slaves. This one is being released in English by J Novel Club, so currently only available in ebook format, but you can pretty much buy it anywhere. It's not like an exclusive thing like what Bookwalker's doing with the Ryuo's work. They are releasing volume number 2 on February 19th, so not too far from now, just next week. Well, I guess this coming week. There was an anime announced in January for this. There's only, I think, I've only seen the one image so far, but They haven't announced any actual release date. My guess is that we're probably not going to see this one until either the end of this year or early into next year. That seems to be kind of when they announce productions are going into work. It seems to be at least like 9 months to a year before we actually see a finished product. So that is at number 6. At number 5, with 6,637 copies sold, Volume 7.5 of Youkoso, Jitsuryoku, Shijou, Shugi no Kyoushitsu, or as I always have a much easier time saying, Classroom of the Elite. This one, of course, has been on the list ever since its release as well. Classroom of the Elite had a huge boost because of its anime over the summer. We saw a bunch of its volumes into the list. All of its more recent volumes that have released since then have spent several weeks in the top 10. Very, very popular series from what I can see. Unfortunately, still no announcements of an English license for this one. Kind of fingers crossed that with it doing so well in Japan that maybe this year we'll hear something. It's more of like a slice of life type story. I mean, I know it's got sort of other elements to it, but it's not a fantasy type stuff. It is still like a school drama, school life type series, which is something that is a category that we have very underserved in official English releases. So I think this one would be a really good candidate for an English release, but we'll just have to wait and see. Nothing has been announced yet. As I said, there was the anime created for it. It showed last year. It was 12 episodes long. You can still stream it on Crunchyroll. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens with this one. If it's not licensed this year, I'm going to say it's never coming out in English. That's just my prediction right now. At number 4, with 7,002 copies sold, volume number 20 of Okami to Koshin Ryuo, also known more commonly by us as Spice and Wolf. Now, this one, of course, is an ongoing series. It is licensed for English by Yen On. Yen On's pretty much caught up. There was a point where they were saying that the series was over, and then all of a sudden, some time passed, there was a spin-off series released, and now they're releasing additional volumes onto the main series. And so we're pretty caught up. Like, we're really not that far behind, and Yen On is even releasing the spin-off series, which I believe is, Wolf and Parchment or something like that. So this is the most recent volume. There was also an anime done years ago based on this one. A young traveling merchant, Kraft Lawrence, has become accustomed to days of roaming and trading with few companions. Or so it was until one peculiar day where the trader finds a young, naked, wolf-like girl asleep in his wagon. The beautiful girl, calling herself Holo, claims to be a local wolf deity worshipped by locals as the god of good harvest. Year after year, she ensured they would reap a good harvest, but she has since grown tired of fulfilling the wishes of the ungrateful locals. Holo ends up striking a deal with Kraft. If he helps her escape the villagers, she will gladly help him in his merchant endeavors. Together, they roam from town to town in search of business, and Kraft realizes both the ups and downs of traveling with a haughty and shrewd wolf goddess. Now, I did read the first volume of this series. I really liked it. It's very different. It has much more of a focus on economics and politics and, playing markets and stuff like that. It's a very different kind of take on the whole fantasy-esque light novel. I got to be honest, though, I felt kind of overwhelmed because even at the point where I read the first volume, I think, what were there, like 15 or 16 volumes already released? And because on this channel I keep doing my best to try and at least read 1 or 2 volumes of whatever's brand new, unfortunately a lot of ongoing series I just kind of end up leaving behind, especially if they're series that are so far ahead that it feels like I'll never get caught up. But definitely a really good series to check out. If I know I've got a couple of like major Spice and Wolf fans here on the channel, and it's justified, absolutely. Like, it is one of those series that if you're looking for something that's a little bit different, maybe it's also a slightly more, I'd say it's a light novel aimed at a slightly more mature audience. I would definitely say it's a series that should be checked out. As I said, I mean, it's one of those series that I keep sort of saying to myself that I should try and get back to reading at least a little bit more of it. But it's just, you know, I look at my pile that I keep having and all the new releases that are coming out, and it's just so overwhelming some days. But definitely a really popular series, and for good reason, and one definitely worth checking out. At number 3, with 7,983 copies sold, Boku no Hero Academia, Yue Hakusho, volume number 3. So this was our volume number 1 last week on the top 10 list, now fallen down to number 3. This is the light novel spin-off of the My Hero Academia series. There's, as far as I understand it, they're kind of like a side story type thing. I think we kind of saw something similar with Trinity 7 a little while ago, where you have a manga series, and then of course they get this anime spin-offs, and then what they'll do is they will write light novels that are kind of like stories that are set in between events, so that they don't directly conflict with the manga series or the anime, but at the same time they provide more additional information and additional stories about the characters. It's kind of, again, it's sort of this interesting thing where we see this with publishers, right? That they try to maximize the value of a popular series. So if you have a really popular light novel, that's why it then gets a manga spin-off, because it's the same publisher and they figure that, you know, double the income, right? Because some people will read manga, some people will read light novels, some people are such insane fans they'll read both. So yeah, I mean, one great story, 2 times the income, right? It's kind of like a no-brainer, I guess, but at least in this case, at least in this case, what I appreciate is that typically when they do things like this, the light novels are not just like a rehash or a regurgitation of the manga story. They are a completely separate side story. So that seems to be kind of what is going on with this particular series. At number 2, with 8,079 copies sold, volume 16 of Netgame no Yome wa Ona no Koja nai to Omota, or as it's commonly known in English, And You Thought There Is Never a Girl Online. We don't have a license for these light novels. The 12-episode anime was licensed by Funimation, I believe was streaming on Crunchyroll. After mustering up the courage to propose to a girl in an online game, naive otaku Hideki Russian Nishimura is devastated when she flat out rejects him. To make matters worse, the girl reveals that she is actually an older man in real life. With his dreams crushed and his heart broken, Russian comes to an abrupt decision in the midst of his raging fit. He will never trust another girl in an online game again. Years later, Russian is now in a guild with 3 other players, one of whom possesses a female avatar by the name of Akko. Akko is deeply in love with Russian and wants to marry him. Although he entertains the possibility that she might be a guy, Russian accepts her proposal, claiming that her gender doesn't matter as long as she is cute in the game. However, after a discussion between guild members that led to all of them having an offline meeting, Russian finds out that Akko, along with the other members, are not just girls, but also his schoolmates. So again, not one that we have licensed in English. This series, though, seems very popular. Like, this is in just the couple of months that I've been doing this countdown, I guess I started in around July of 2017. Pretty much every time there's been a new volume of this one, it always premieres high on the list and at least lasts a couple of weeks at a time. So again, though, this is, you know, again, like this is another one of those sort of slice of life type series that has gaming at the center of its story. It's the same thing that we were talking about, the whole thing with gamers, right? And talking about how that slice of life category is so underserved. And I don't understand why we can't get these kind of series when it seems to me like they just seems like a no-brainer that, you know, this is your audience, right? Like, I just don't understand why we don't get them. And again, maybe it's just, I mean, I don't know North American sales. You know, because light novels aren't a big enough segment yet to get their own sort of sales list like they are getting in Japan. It's very hard to tell just what sells. The little bit of information that we've gotten, like from J Novel Club and so forth, Isekai still seems to be the big seller. So, I mean, it's really no wonder that we're getting tons of isekais. And honestly, I would imagine Yen Press is pretty much the same because that seems to be the majority of the titles that they're pursuing as well. They do have at least a few slice of life books starting to come out. I mean, they already are releasing My Teenage Romantic Comedy As Wrong As I Expected. They do have A Little Sisters All You Need is coming out, which, as I understand, is much more of a slice of life book than just a siscon type book. At least I'm hoping so. I'll find out when it gets released because I'm going to read it for all of you. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, though, like this is a series that the anime, like the further we get from the anime, if there's been no license announced, the less likely I think it is to happen. So I think this is another one that either it's not going to happen at all, or if it doesn't happen this year that this gets licensed, it's probably not going to. Finally, we come to number 1. So bear in mind that number 2 sold 8,079 copies. Number 1 sold 48,264 copies. And it's a volume number 5. And I'm pretty sure you all can guess because, well, I mean, if you've looked at the thumbnail, you already know. But I mean, it's obvious because we only really see these kind of crazy numbers when it's something from this series. And that is Sword Art Online, in this case, Progressive. So Sword Art Online Progressive, I'll read the little blurb that I have, but generally Sword Art Online Progressive, if you're not familiar, it is Raki Kawahara's retelling of the Aincrad story. When Sword Art Online was originally written, the first book was written as a contest entry. And so Reki Kawahara was required to basically give the book an ending. So he couldn't have it like, oh, we're only going to tell the story of the first 5 floors of Aincrad or whatever in this book. He actually had to finish the story. And in order for him to continue the story of Sword Art Online, that's why we start getting these other things like Gun-Gale Online, Elfheim Online, all these kind of things. So Sword Art Online Progressive is kind of like Reki Kawahara going back and going, you know what? Aincrad was probably the best story arc of Sword Art. I want to tell it the way that it probably should have been told from the start, which is over a large and long, expansive series. And everybody's kind of chomping at the bit for him to keep going because I can tell you that the first Sword Art Online Progressive volume, I did read and review it. I haven't really progressed with the other ones yet. I mean, they've been coming out at a very, very slow pace, like at least a year or more in between volumes. So I guess I haven't felt quite the drive that I have to. But I can say that the first volume, far better writing, far better characterizations of the characters, getting a lot more into the actual game mechanics. So it's a huge improvement really on the Aincrad storyline. So in this one, in the first one, when it opens up in Sword Art Online Progressive, there's no way to beat this game. The only difference is when and where you die. 1 month has passed since Akihiko Kayaba's deadly game began, and the body count continues to rise. 2,000 players are already dead. Kirito and Asuna are 2 very different people, but they both desire to fight alone. Nonetheless, they find themselves drawn together to face challenges from both within and without. Given that the entire virtual world they now live in has been created as a death trap, the surviving players of Sword Art Online are starting to get desperate, and desperation makes them dangerous to loners like Kirito and Asuna. As it becomes clear that solitude equals suicide, will the two be able to overcome their differences to find the strength to believe in each other and in so doing survive? Sword Art Online Progressive is a new version of the Sword Art Online tale that starts at the beginning of Kirito and Asuna's epic adventure on the very first level of the deadly world of Aincrad. So, yeah, it is. It's a retelling. Kawahara initially was kind of like, well, I'm kind of trying to make it work, so it's still telling the same story, blah, blah, blah. But even in the first book, there's enough changes and alterations that, yeah, like you really just kind of have to look at it as a complete retelling of Aincrad. I don't think necessarily that when it ends, it's going to necessarily change what comes after. If anything, the thing that about Progressive in the first volume, at least, that I really liked was, like I said, it made Kirito and Asuna into much more interesting characters. They were much more multidimensional. Their relationship, I mean, we're just seeing the start of it, but already their relationship seemed so much truer, and you could see it growing into this, love that they have in the main series. You could really see that happening. It seemed like it was being set on a much more gradual and, well, I don't want to say realistic, but you could buy into it a lot more. So Progressive, I mean, I've said that I think Progressive is really, if you like the idea of Sword Art Online, Progressive is probably the better series of them. But the problem is that how do you recommend a series when book 5 is only coming out? I don't know what floor they're at in book 5, but I think they've only been clearing 1 to 2, maybe 3 floors a book, which means if that ratio has continued, book 5 means they're only on like the 10th or 11th floor, which means that there are still 64 floors to go before the book is over, the series can be over. Hard to tell people like, hey, jump on board of this series that could potentially take another 20 plus books to read, and the author's putting them out at 1 every year to year and a half. Although, story goes that apparently volume number 6 is already slated for a release, I think I read somewhere in May of this year. So perhaps Kawahara is upping the ante a little bit. We know that he finished in Japan. All of the material for Sword Art, the main series, is out. It's published. There have been rumblings that he was going to continue the main series with a new story, but I wonder if he's going to start devoting more time to the Progressive series and kind of flip it so that Progressive gets released more often and the ongoing main series becomes the 1 a year, 1 every other year, whatever. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I know Sword Art takes a lot of grief online, but there is still a massive fan base for it. And, definitely there are some reasons that Sword Art deserves kind of the pain that it gets. Although I will say that Progressive, just based on even the first book, I think the first book went a long way to improving and fixing a lot of those issues. Now, just in terms of the anime, you may find it interesting if you have not read Sword Art Online at all, or if you have only read the main series. You may kind of say to yourself, like, there was stuff in the anime, characters and stories in the anime that I don't remember happening at all in the main series. Like, where did that material come from? Well, it came from Progressive. When they started the anime, they actually used some of the material from Progressive to pad out the Aincrad story in the anime. So if you kind of read both, you get sort of the complete picture of how the anime was put together, and it can kind of give you an idea of why the anime feels kind of weird and a bit disjointed, because they were borrowing from all these different sources just to put together this sort of one storyline. And then, You know, obviously the later storylines are a little bit weaker. Let's be honest, they are. Aincrad's been pretty, sorry, not Aincrad, but the Alicization arc has been fairly decent though. The later series, like after volume, what is it, 9, I think is where it started. I'm up to volume 12. I haven't read it yet. I will be reading it very soon. So Alicization arc is pretty good. It'll be interesting to see how that is successfully animated or not, and whether fans sort of have a different feeling once they start getting into that arc. So time will tell. In any case, it just makes me laugh. I'm like, wow, so the volume number 1 on this list sold more volumes than all of the other in the top 10 combined. Like, what a beast. Like I said, I almost feel like the reason that there's so much of the Ryuou's work is never done on the list this week is because a lot of people were just like, get out of the way. Progressive, we know it's coming out, just get out of the way because it's going to just blow us all away. It's like what they do with movies, right? When the big blockbusters coming out, all the other smaller movies just kind of like go to other weekends to make room because they know that they're just not going to get watched that weekend, so why bother? So I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at, obviously I'd have to look at the release charts myself to actually know that for sure, but man, it sure feels that way. This week, I'd like to say a special thanks to Ricardo Matos, Renzaz, and Alex Y, and all the rest of my supporters on Patreon. Everybody has been incredibly helpful and supportive, and I've got some new projects that are going to be coming out, and it's all thanks to their support on Patreon. If you'd like to help support those projects and the continuation of this channel, you can check it out at patreon.com/justusrstone. So those are the top 10 best-selling light novels of February 5th to the 11th of 2018. I make a prediction that Sword Art Online Progressive will still be number 1 next week. Like, even if it only sold half of what it sold this week, it would still probably be one of the best-selling titles. So, yeah, that's my prediction, is it's probably going to be number 1. But hopefully we'll get some other releases out so the list isn't so owned by the Ryuou's work is never done. I do like to see a good mix of titles on this. It makes it a lot more interesting for me. Sure, it makes it a lot more interesting for you guys as well. So if you're brand new to the channel, you should subscribe. I not only do this countdown every single week, I also do a review of 2 to 3 light novels on a weekly basis as well. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.